This work reminds us of who we truly are, not what we became in the past 6,000 years of deception. Before all colors, there was blackness, the original energy of the universe. From that source, all things came into being. Black is the origin, the balance, the foundation. Melanin is the divine substance that structures the brain, spinal cord, and nervous system. It is melanin that allows us to connect with higher consciousness, to dream in color, to heal, and to regenerate. The African, the original human, carries the highest concentration of melanin, making us the root and crown of all humanity. From physiology to spirituality, melanin links us to the cosmos, the breath of life, and the divine order. The Book of the Generations of Adam describes Adam as a ruddy or fair-skinned man, a meaning drawn from Hebrew and Arabic. In the biblical account, Elohim, the deities, created Adam in their likeness, marking the beginning of the Adamite race, identified as fair-skinned. Job 14:1 emphasizes that man born of a woman is a few days and full of trouble, connecting Adam's creation to human struggle. According to both the Bible and the Quran, Adam represents the first man in a chosen lineage. The Quran, 2:30-37, 3:33, confirms that Adam, Noah, Abraham, and the family of Imran were divinely selected. Likewise, the Bible records this genealogy from Adam to Noah in Genesis 5:3-32, and continues with Abraham in Genesis 25:7-8, who lived 175 years. The New Testament lists Jesus' ancestry back to Adam in Luke 3:23-38 and Matthew 1:1-17. Taken literally, these genealogies suggest that the Adamite line is only about 6,000 years old, contradicting fossil evidence of humans millions of years old. Thus, the Adamite story is the record of one particular people rather than all of humanity. The Adamite race, described as ruddy or fair, was seen as a hybrid lineage with special dominion, yet also marked as wicked, Genesis 6:5. Their dominion on earth, granted in Genesis 1:27, is echoed in Revelation 13:2, which says their power was inherited from earlier beings. The scriptures themselves portray this group as troubled. Genesis 3:15 declares enmity within their seed, while Genesis 6:5 describes them as continually imagining evil. In biblical narratives, the term fair is repeatedly linked to whiteness, ruddy, ivory, snow-like. Nazarites are described as purer than snow, whiter than milk, ruddy in body, Lamentations 4:7. Solomon, too, is described as white and ruddy in Song of Solomon 5:9-15. David is likewise depicted as ruddy and of fair countenance, 1 Samuel 16:12, 17:42. From these records, the Adamites are portrayed as a distinct, fair-skinned lineage, separate from Africans, black, Asians, yellow, and other peoples. The Quran and Hadith traditions even describe Muhammad as having a fair or ruddy complexion, further linking him to the Adamite race rather than to black African lineage. The Canaanites, descendants of Ham's son Canaan, are described as cursed, spreading abroad and intermixing. Biblical texts say they carried diseases, including leprosy, and mixed with Israelites and others, Genesis 9:25, Genesis 10:18-19. Albino traits appeared among all races, but among Canaanites this condition was seen as a curse. Over time, widespread intermarriage blurred lineages. Historical accounts describe how Adamites and related groups often sought women of other peoples for survival, sometimes by conquest. The Bible even permits them to kill enemy men and take women, Deuteronomy 12, Numbers 31:17-18. In practice, this meant that stronger black and brown populations were continually targeted, with men enslaved or destroyed while women were absorbed into new hybrid lineages. The text argues that fair-skinned races required such mixing for survival, due to weaker genetics and lower melanin. Without periodic infusion of darker bloodlines, they risked decline within 4 generations. This need, it is claimed, explains historical patterns of conquest, slavery, and assimilation. The critique extends further. Adamites are described as needing artificial stimulants, alcohol, coffee, drugs, to feel alive, while darker-skinned peoples, rich in melanin, naturally connect to rhythm, creativity, and vitality. Melanin is framed as both an electrical and chemical conductor, enhancing sensitivity, creativity, and harmony with nature. In contrast, Adamites, described in Egyptian texts as tamahu, living filth, are portrayed as cut off from full sensory and spiritual experience. The body communicates constantly with itself through rhythms, signals, and natural processes. For example, sunlight interacts with melanin, which helps the body translate light into information it can understand. That information is then used to regulate processes like the production of vitamin D. In this way, vitamin D is not something we simply get, but a natural response created within the body. This shows how melanin plays a role in converting external signals into internal understanding and action. Melanin is also deeply connected to the brain, particularly in areas like the brainstem, where it appears to act as a gateway to the unconscious memory bank. This may explain why practices such as relaxation, meditation, and concentration are emphasized. They help us access deeper layers of memory and awareness. When unconscious content floods into the conscious mind, it reflects increased melanin activity in those brain regions. At the center of this system lies the pineal gland, often symbolized as a small pine cone in the brain. It produces hormones and helps regulate impulses, the passing of information between nerve cells. This makes the pineal gland not only a regulator of the nervous system but also a bridge between science, religion, and mysticism. It links ordinary sensory experience to higher perception beyond the five senses, supporting intuition and expanded awareness. Different groups of people experience sensitivity in different ways. Populations with higher levels of melanin may have greater access to these expanded senses, whereas those with less melanin may naturally remain more limited in that realm. This leads into the idea of being in rhythm with nature. Melanin allows us to connect with natural cycles such as the circadian rhythm, seasonal changes, and even larger planetary cycles spanning thousands of years. When we are out of rhythm, through diet, lifestyle, or artificial environments, we lose harmony with nature. Practices like fasting during solstices and equinoxes were traditional ways to reset this balance. The body itself is ritualistic. Hormones follow a 24-hour cycle, with different glands and organs becoming more or less active at certain times of day. If this rhythm is disrupted by artificial light, poor habits, or stress, the body becomes confused, leading to problems such as irregular digestion, poor sleep, or weakened intuition. Natural rhythms align us not only with the day-night cycle but also with celestial movements and the larger cycles of life. Gender differences also play a role in these rhythms. Women's biology tends to follow a 24-pattern cycle, while men's follows a 23-patterned one, linked to the differences in chromosomes. Telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes, are longer at birth and naturally shorten with age, but lifestyle and habits can either preserve or damage them. Longer telomeres are often found in people of African descent, which may offer additional protection and vitality. At the spiritual level, these biological processes reflect a deeper truth. Emotions, hormones, and rhythms are all interconnected. For example, a mother's emotional state during pregnancy influences the hormonal environment of the fetus, shaping development in powerful ways. This underscores why collective healing, especially of women, becomes essential for restoring balance to entire communities. The pineal gland again emerges as central to this system. It regulates melatonin, which peaks between midnight and early morning, guiding sleep and dreams. Dreams themselves are a gateway into the unconscious, unlocking creativity and wisdom. Yet in modern life, with artificial lighting, stress, and disrupted schedules, many people lose touch with this natural dreaming process, cutting themselves off from insight and inspiration. Rituals, whether positive or negative, strengthen these rhythms. Healthy rituals, like meditation, chanting, or seasonal fasting, can harmonize the body with natural cycles, while unhealthy ones, such as habitual caffeine or nicotine use, can throw the system further out of balance. The key is to consciously choose rituals that align with nature. Ultimately, melanin is not just a pigment but a medium through which the body interprets light, rhythm, and energy. It links biology with spirituality, grounding us in natural cycles that extend from the cellular level to planetary and cosmic scales. When we live in tune with these rhythms, we cultivate health, intuition, and harmony. When we live out of tune, we fall into confusion, disconnection, and imbalance. At this stage, I want to clarify something. In much of the metaphysical and esoteric doctrine that many of you have studied, you were taught about the 7 seats or chakras. This is because the teachers of that science only had knowledge of 7. They were not aware of the 9. Now, I am taking you beyond the 7, introducing you to the next 2 centers, not just the one at the crown, but also the one that lies beyond it. If you consult the ancient Egyptian language, you will find under the word brow seat the term mir, which has also been translated as pyramid or central fire. The Egyptians identified this point as the 6th seat, the 3rd eye. Beyond this, they spoke of the crown, linked to the 12 cranial nerves which symbolically correspond to the 12 signs of the zodiac. Within that crown, they placed the 7th seat, the crown chakra. When returning to Egypt, in the temple of Hathor, one can observe on the ceiling the calendar of Dendera. At its center appears the goddess Taweret, or Teret, also known among the Moors as Zodiacus. She represents the central point of the zodiac, the mother of all mammalian and reptilian life, often called by many names. In her image, we see the ancient acknowledgement of creation itself, the mother principle at the center of all existence. This degree of study takes us step by step, from Earth, through the body, beyond the body, and into the universe. The zodiac itself is a reflection of our mother, the universal womb, the science of creation both outward and inward. Now, turning to scripture, we find further evidence that the deities described were not abstract forces but beings who consumed offerings. In Leviticus 3:11-17, for example, detailed instructions are given on which portions of the sacrificial animal are pleasing to the Lord, the organs, the fat, the kidneys, and so forth. It is clearly stated, all the fat is the Lord's. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. You must not eat any fat or blood. Why? Because the fat and blood were reserved for the deity, who delighted in them. Similarly, in Lamentations 4:10 and 2 Kings 6:28-29, we even read of cannibalism among the people, mothers consuming their own children during times of destruction. These passages reveal a disturbing reality. This Lord was a being who ate, who demanded offerings of meat and organs, and whose priests shared in these meals. Now, let us speak of origins. The Tarites, the first people, were transported to this planet as part of Project 24. They arrived as germinal life within the primeval waters, brought here millions of years ago by extraterrestrials from the Orion and Sirius systems, themselves related to other advanced beings. The Adamites, on the other hand, were not transported but grafted here as an experiment, designed by reptilian and humanoid beings from the Draco system. This is why their traditions recall origins tied to figures like Odin, Thor, and Frey, and why their presence is linked to manipulation, hybridization, and artificial creation. Thus, we see two branches, the natural, Tarites, who grew in harmony with Earth, evolving through the waters of life, and the artificial, Adamites, whose very being was engineered, leaving them bound to the Earth in a disharmonious way. This explains why the Adamite is described as a disease, mentally and physically, bloodlusting, unnatural, and hybrid. Even Jesus himself is quoted in John 8:44, saying, "Ye are of your father the devil." He was a liar from the beginning. The ancient texts, including Genesis 6, the Book of Jubilees, and the Book of Enoch, describe how angels descended, intermingled with women, and produced giants. These offspring devoured the resources of earth, turning violent, consuming flesh and blood, and ultimately destroying themselves. This violation of the natural order corrupted flesh, thought, and rhythm itself. To fall out of natural order is to fall out of harmony with the cycles of time, leading only to destruction. The Sumerian tablets uncovered in the 19th century, the Enuma Elish, confirm that Adamites were a grafted race, created by the Anunnaki to rule for a set period. Their gods made them to demonstrate their own power, to show that they could fashion a kind of man and give him dominion, but only temporarily. Likewise, the Nag Hammadi scrolls found in 1945 and the Dead Sea Scrolls of 1947 revealed truths long hidden, the story of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, their children, and their life in Ethiopia. These discoveries cracked open the sealed books Daniel spoke of, unveiling what had been suppressed for centuries. The deeper lesson here is this: the Adamite story is not your story. Black people, the Tarites, are not of that line. Our DNA, organs, glands, blood, and essence are fundamentally different. Each race has its own unique traits: Africans with their coiled hair and fuller features, Aborigines with their distinct brow, Indians with their chin dimples and elongated ears, Asians with their epicanthic fold and hollow hair, Europeans with their light irises and fine hair. All of these traits, however, originate in the San people of southern Africa, the Bushmen, who carry every marker of humanity, for they are the first. The Adamite race, grafted and mixed, carries recessive traits such as light eyes and Rh-negative blood, leading to difficulties in reproduction and miscarriages. This is because their origin was not natural but experimental. The natural line, however, grows in harmony, as seen in the Tarites, who emerged from the waters over millions of years. In conclusion, the lesson is this: there are two paths, those of the natural, who are in rhythm with the universe, and those of the artificial, who are out of rhythm and therefore fading. Each being, each race, has its unique nature, but only those rooted in the natural order can continue to evolve in harmony with creation itself. Throughout ancient teachings, there are claims that the human genetic makeup was influenced by deliberate breeding, involving both animals and higher beings. Certain animals, such as the baboon, mandrill, and other simians, alongside wolves, canines, and pigs, were believed to have been used in the genetic engineering of different human types. According to this perspective, specific traits in Caucasus are traced back to these animal lineages: lighter eye colors from canines and wolves, sharp facial features from baboons and mandrills, and certain organ structures from pigs. Other influences are said to come from the Anunnaki, the Arkans, and the San, Bushmen, people, with Bushman DNA still present though less dominant. From this point of view, what many cultures now accept as beauty standards such as sharp noses and contoured facial features, are actually animal-derived traits. Practices like contouring in the beauty industry can thus be interpreted as imitating these non-human characteristics. Over time, extensive race mixing and interbreeding spread these traits across the globe, creating shared physical and genetic characteristics among diverse peoples. For example, Asians, Africans, and Indians generally retained broader features, while certain groups develop lighter eyes or sharper facial traits through admixture with Caucasus. Humanity's current genetic distortions are not permanent. Nature, like the brain after trauma, always seeks to return to its baseline. In this cycle, the so-called first race, the original dark-skinned peoples, will remain, while the last race, whites, will eventually fade. This reflects a natural correction, restoring balance after ages of genetic manipulation and disharmony. The creation of Adamites or early humans, as interpreted through biblical passages, is presented as evidence that certain groups were designed for servitude. Genesis passages describing Cain as a tiller of the ground and Adam cursed to labor are read as indications that these beings were made to toil. Consequently, the tendency to enslave others is explained as a genetic inheritance. Those who are enslaved internally also seek to enslave externally. This is contrasted with the African worldview of living in harmony with nature, as opposed to the Western impulse to dominate it. Race mixing also produced cultural distortions. In Nigeria, for example, television programs that adopt European names, promote skin bleaching, or glorify mixed race features are seen as evidence of internalized oppression. Similarly, in Latin America, Africa, and India, individuals sometimes adopt European standards and participate in systems that oppress their own people, attempting to fit in with whiteness. This tendency dates back to colonial practices in which mixed-race children were privileged and trained to maintain systems of control. Spiritually, these distortions are linked to what is called the mark of the beast, a genetic marker rather than a literal symbol. This mark represents inherited distortions that must be cleansed through conscious living, fasting, spiritual discipline, and reactivation of melanin and higher glands. Practices such as meditation, breathwork, and reconnecting with nature are described as ways to restore balance and awaken the pineal gland, hypothalamus, and pituitary, essential centers for growth, memory, and spiritual vision. The pineal gland, referred to as the third eye, is central to this restoration. Ancient Africans symbolized it with the uraeus serpent, signifying energy rising through the spine and connection with the sun. Unlike Caucasus, whose pineal glands are heavily calcified, people of color retain greater pineal activity, linking them more directly to sunlight, melanin production, and spiritual awareness. Melanin itself is described as not only a physical pigment but also a chemical key to memory, rhythm, creativity, and empathy. Melanin enables both black and white and color vision, supports retinal health, and stimulates hormonal balance. Eye color differences, blue, green, hazel, etc., are explained as illusions created by the way light interacts with minimal melanin, while dark eyes are recognized as the most functional and protective. Similarly, carbon, the elemental building block of life, is tied to blackness and melanin, symbolically connecting original people to the fundamental structures of the universe. Consciousness begins developing before birth. Around the 24th week of pregnancy, about 6 months in, a child in the womb starts to refine and strengthen awareness. This is why babies born prematurely after 6 months often have a high chance of survival. The final trimester, from 6 to 9 months, is especially important for the fine-tuning of consciousness. Spiritual teachings describe this growth as requiring a certain amount of energetic force, often called ether, in order to progress to higher levels of awareness. Carbon is the fourth most common element in the universe, just as light exists as the counterpart to darkness. Inside Earth's atmosphere, light is limited, but in the cosmos, darkness is without limit. Cosmology explains that 24% of the universe is dark matter and 76% is dark energy, showing the balance built into nature's design of the cosmos and Earth itself. The periodic table holds the basic building blocks of life. Among the most important elements are hydrogen, helium, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. These form the foundation for all life. The Moon, about 240,000 miles from Earth, also plays a part in the balance of our system. Our solar system can be described from the Sun outward. The Sun is Shamash, followed by Mercury, called Zabak, then Venus, called Canas, then Earth, or Taha, and its moon is part of the Earth system. Next is Mars, called Harib, followed by the asteroid belt, Zak-Zanner, which separates the inner planets from the outer ones. Beyond are Jupiter, known as Moss, Saturn as Milan, Uranus as Fake, Neptune as May, and Pluto as GH. This sequence reflects both astronomy and the design of the multiverse. Some teachings describe the origin of existence as a point of singularity, a central origin from which creation expands. It is symbolized as a rope, which must be held onto. This rope represents the genetic thread of life and consciousness. Holding onto it means maintaining sense, reason, and connection despite the distractions that can break that bond. Melanin plays a central role in life and consciousness. It is not only in the skin but also in the brain, the bloodstream, the auditory nerves, and the nervous system. Melanin makes it possible to perceive more fully, to hear a wider range of tones, and to connect to rhythm and the movements of life in deeper ways. People with higher levels of melanin can experience music, sound, and vibration more completely. Melanin also protects and converts energy. It acts as a shield against ultraviolet radiation. Without melanin, UV rays can damage DNA, causing it to break down or mutate, which leads to aging and disease such as cancer. With melanin, ultraviolet light is converted into forms the body can use, giving energy instead of harm. Melanin can also store this energy so the body can draw on it later. Practices such as spending time in the sun, chanting in the correct tones, and rhythmic breathing can all activate and preserve melanin, allowing it to be tapped when needed. Melanin flows through the body, moving from the bloodstream to the organs and supporting every major system. In the skin, it acts as a protective umbrella over the nuclei of skin cells, shielding DNA from being directly damaged by ultraviolet light. Without this protection, UV radiation can disrupt and scramble DNA, a process that often leads to cancer. With melanin present, ultraviolet rays are converted into forms the body can use, creating a protective buffer. The absence of sufficient melanin leaves cells vulnerable. Damage can occur not only in the outer skin but also in deeper layers, which speeds aging and raises the risk of disease. This is why many people with low melanin content are more prone to sun damage, wrinkles, and skin cancers. Sunscreens attempt to mimic this natural protection by blocking or filtering UV rays, but the body's own melanin is a far more complete defense. There are two main types of ultraviolet radiation to consider. UVA rays penetrate deeply into the dermis, where they weaken collagen and elastin fibers, causing sagging and wrinkles over time. They are also able to pass through clouds and glass, which is why exposure continues indoors and on overcast days. Tanning beds primarily emit UVA rays, which accelerate skin aging. UVB rays, in contrast, affect the surface of the skin. They stimulate melanin production, leading to tanning, freckles, and, when exposure overwhelms the body's defenses, sunburn. A useful way to remember this is that UVA relates to aging while UVB relates to burning. For people with abundant melanin, burning is uncommon because tanning is an immune system response. Burning typically occurs when the system is overloaded or when the body has been deprived of sunlight and is suddenly re-exposed to intense rays. Vitamin D synthesis is also tied to UV exposure. Melanin regulates this process, ensuring balance between protection and absorption. For those with sufficient melanin, sunlight tends to preserve youthfulness and vitality, while prolonged sun deprivation can weaken these natural defenses. Reintroduction to sunlight after long absence is best done gradually, allowing the body to reawaken its protective systems. Melanin does more than protect skin. It is central to the functioning of blood, the nervous system, and sensory organs. Inside the ear, eyes, and brain, melanin enhances perception and communication between systems. In the blood, it supports the plasma and platelets that allow circulation and healing. Without it, the body's ability to sense, process, and repair is diminished. This knowledge has often been suppressed or ignored, because acknowledging it undermines long-held myths of racial hierarchy. Despite the suppression, research shows that melanin operates at multiple levels, shaping not only appearance but also perception, resilience, and cellular health. Its presence in the skin, brain, blood, and nerves makes it a cornerstone of human life. Melanin exists in different stages and concentrations in the human body, influencing both physical traits and physiological functions. These stages, often called melanosomes, are categorized into 4 levels. In the first stage, melanosomes are nearly empty and lack the cellular machinery to produce melanin. People with this level tend to have very light skin and burn easily in the sun. The second stage has the machinery to produce melanin but remains mostly empty. Individuals may tan slightly but still have limited protection. The third stage is partially filled, providing moderate melanin content, as seen in many people of mixed ancestry. The fourth stage is fully filled, with active machinery producing abundant melanin, typical of people with darker skin. Melanin is not just about skin color, it plays a role in hearing, vision, blood function, and neurological processes. Higher melanin levels improve the ability to perceive rhythm, sense vibrations, and experience a broader range of sounds. This is why musical and sensory experiences are often different depending on melanin concentration. Historically, certain populations have had higher melanin levels and greater protection from environmental stressors. Pure Africans, for example, often possess fully active melanosomes, while mixed populations may fall into the third stage, and many Europeans typically fall into stages 1 or 2. Migration, mixing of populations, and adaptation to different environments influence these distributions. Melanin also interacts with the blood. Certain populations, including many Africans, have unique blood traits that help their bodies resist diseases like malaria. These traits, combined with melanin's protective properties, enhance survival in challenging environments. Europeans, who historically lacked high melanin levels, often sought ways to supplement or mimic its effects through diet, mixing, or artificial interventions. Beyond biology, melanin has been connected to energy, perception, and spiritual resilience. Maintaining and stimulating melanin through sunlight, nutrition, rhythmic breathing, and toning can enhance vitality and protect against physical and environmental stresses. This understanding also highlights why suppression or neglect of melanin's importance has historical and social implications. Knowledge about melanin and its full effects has often been minimized or distorted to uphold false hierarchies. Recognizing its role provides insight into human physiology, resilience, and the broader design of life. Throughout history, populations with higher melanin levels were often targeted for their physical and biological traits. Pure Africans, with fully active melanosomes, possessed resilience, sensory acuity, and blood traits that supported survival in diverse and challenging environments. Europeans, with lower melanin levels, lacked these natural protections and often attempted to supplement or compensate through diet, mixing with other populations, or artificial interventions. Migration and population mixing changed the distribution of melanin over time. In South America and the Caribbean, Europeans, Africans, and indigenous peoples intermingled, leading to a range of melanin levels across mixed populations. This mixing could both raise or lower melanin activity depending on genetic combinations. Many Europeans sought to increase melanin in order to enhance physiological functions such as blood performance, sensory perception, and overall vitality. Artificial interventions, such as injections or dietary strategies, were sometimes used to mimic melanin's effects. These interventions could temporarily enhance pigmentation, energy, or even affect sexual responsiveness, reflecting melanin's influence on hormonal and neurological processes. Despite these attempts, naturally high melanin levels confer protection and functionality that cannot be fully replicated artificially. Melanin's role extended beyond the individual body to influence entire communities. Populations with higher melanin levels were more resistant to certain diseases, while those with lower levels were more vulnerable. For example, unique blood markers like the Duffy factor helped African populations resist malaria. Europeans historically lacked such protections, which influenced migration patterns, colonization strategies, and social hierarchies. These biological differences were often misinterpreted or suppressed to support racial hierarchies. Knowledge of melanin's full impact was minimized or distorted to maintain myths of inferiority or superiority. Recognizing melanin's central role in physiology, perception, and survival reframes historical narratives and highlights the importance of understanding human diversity from a scientific and spiritual perspective. Historically, Africans with high melanin levels were targeted for their biological and physiological advantages. During colonization and the transatlantic slave trade, European powers sought to exploit these populations for labor, reproduction, and even biological traits, recognizing that melanin-rich individuals possessed resilience, strong immune systems, and other protective advantages. In the Americas, Africans were forcibly brought to supplement local populations whose melanin levels were lower or compromised through disease and environmental stress. Europeans understood that mixed or lower melanin populations were more vulnerable to certain diseases, so they relied on Africans with higher melanin for survival, labor, and the maintenance of colonies. Over time, mixing with Europeans and indigenous populations created new melanin distributions, often weakening the natural resilience of mixed populations. Historical records indicate that after events like World War II, many Europeans relocated to regions such as South America, bringing with them the knowledge and practices intended to manipulate or augment melanin. Over generations, this migration and mixing altered local populations' genetic and melanin distributions, with some individuals gaining moderate melanin levels while others remained low. In colonial contexts, Europeans also exploited Africans and indigenous populations to access their biological advantages. Africans' higher melanin levels, combined with resilient blood traits, made them particularly valuable for labor, survival, and reproduction in harsh or disease-prone environments. Europeans systematically controlled these populations through slavery, forced reproduction, and selective breeding, ensuring that the traits they valued, strength, immunity, and melanin-rich physiology, were maintained or redistributed according to their interests. Resistance to these narratives, coupled with modern research on melanin's functions, highlights both the scientific and historical significance of this pigment in human life. In addition to targeting melanin-rich populations for physical and physiological traits, Europeans also faced challenges related to their own blood and health. Many Europeans historically had lower melanin levels and certain blood deficiencies, including hemophilia and reduced hemoglobin function. Hemophilia, a hereditary disorder affecting the blood's ability to clot, made injury or blood loss far more dangerous. Their platelets were weaker, and their fibrin mesh, the structure that seals wounds, was incomplete, leaving them vulnerable to excessive bleeding. To compensate, Europeans sought populations with stronger, melanin-rich blood, particularly Africans, whose blood carried higher concentrations of melanin and protective markers like the Duffy factor. Understanding melanin in this holistic way, its biological, historical, and spiritual dimensions, offers insight into human development, the design of the body, and the mechanisms that have shaped both individual and collective survival over time.